this time. I would now turn the call meeting over to ACCV Chair, Ms. Beth Luthi. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you, Carolyn. This is Beth Luthi, Chair of the ACCV. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And welcome. What I would like to do is to do a bit of a roll call to begin with, so all of our listeners know who is on the line. We'll start with me. I'm Beth Luthi. I am representing the National Association of Pediatric Nurse Practitioners. Alexandra, do you want to go next?
Sure, I'm Alexandra Stewart. I am an ACCV member.
And Kathleen? We'll come back to Kathleen. Tina, are you there?
Yes, I am. This is Tina Tan. I'm a member of the ACCV representing the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Thank you. And then Cody?
Yes, I'm here. I'm a pediatrician from Tufts, and I also, along with Tina, help represent the AAP.
Thank you. Martha?
I'm Martha Toomey, and I am representing parents who have a child with vaccine injury.
Thank you, Martha. John?
Yes, hi, I'm a member of the ACCV. I represent vaccine-injured petitioners.
Thank you. Dino?
Hi, I'm Dino Sangiamo. I'm an attorney. I am the member of the commission whose practice includes the representation of vaccine manufacturers, and I apologize for being late. I was having problems with the connection. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you. And Kathleen? Are you on the
line?
line?
I had my mute button on before. I am a pediatric nurse practitioner and from George Mason University.
Thank you, Kathleen. Our first item of business is
Beth,
actually, yes.
Can we go around the room here so people know who are here?
Oh, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
This is Narayan Nair, the Division Director for the Division of Injury Compensation Programs with HRSA.
Hi, Narayan.
Hello.
Catherine Reeves, I'm Deputy Director of the Office of Vaccine Litigation at the Justice Department.
Andrea Davey, I'm with the HHS Office of the General Counsel.
Okay, that's everybody here, Beth.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
No, thank you for keeping me on track. All right, so our first item of business is actually to approve the minutes. So we actually have minutes from December 2017 and then our latest meeting in March of 2018, both of which would have been sent out by Annie. Let's start with just December of 2017. Were there any corrections that anyone needed to make on the December 2017 minutes? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the December 2017 minutes?
So moved.
So second.
Thank you. So I think we had Cody
And Martha.
and Martha. Thank you. And then all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
And
Aye.
any opposed? Hearing none, let's move forward. March 2018 minutes are the ones that we'll be talking about next. Are there any corrections to the March 2018 minutes? Okay, hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the March 2018 minutes as distributed?
So moved.
I second.
Cody.
Martha.
Thanks, Martha. All right, all in favor then of approving the March 2018 minutes, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay,
Beth?
hearing none, I think we're good
Beth?
there. Yes, go ahead.
Beth, this is Martha. I have two questions. Did we skip over public comment on agenda items?
And
And my second question is, And second question, I'd like to talk about the lunch break. I don't know about anyone else, but I don't need an hour for lunch. I was wondering if we could now make the decision to only take maybe 15 minutes for lunch. Would that be possible?
Yeah, as a motion, we can go ahead and consider that. I guess I was thinking maybe we should see how things go a little bit and see if we're ahead or if we're behind when we start getting close to the 12 o'clock. And you're right, Martha. I did skip to the 10:15 approval of minutes.
I'm not criticizing you, sweetheart. Just pointing. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
All right. I forgot. I think I forgot it last time, and I was just bound and determined to not forget it.
Well, you're new. You're the new chair. Learning curve. You're our leader now.
All right. So I'd just like to point out that we have not only a quorum, but we have absolutely everyone in attendance, which is fantastic. Operator, if you would open the line for public comments on the agenda items. So this is the space where the public can comment just on agenda items at this point. If there are other commentary, we'll take that at, I've got it at 1:30 on my agenda. So public comments on agenda items.
And at this time, if you have any public comments, you may press *1 and record your name. Again, for public comments at this time, please press *1 and record your name. And I'll stand by for any public comments at this time. And I am currently showing no one queued up for any public comments at this time.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. We'll move forward then. So now that we've done the approval of the minutes, our next item on the agenda is actually a work group update. So the work group that was discussed last time has met, and I will let Alexandra do a quick update and report on what the work group has been doing. Alexandra?
Good morning. Yes, we have decided to revive the process work group, and we're going to incorporate new commissioners. We met twice, April 11th and May 21st, and the officers were appointed during the May meeting. The chair is Martha Toomey, but she was unable to attend both of those meetings, so that's why I'm giving the update at the moment. And the vice chair is John Howie, and I'm going to be the secretary. And I'll just very quickly summarize our discussions during both of the meetings. John Howie suggested that we should identify the existing recommendations before we move forward with anything else and determine their status. And I believe that those recommendations are on the website. So by the next meeting, I hope that we can all, look at that and review everything. Also, John suggested that we could review the funding and staffing issues that cause a backlog in claims. Then we also had some preliminary discussions about developing recommendations related to how the commission interacts with the general public. There's a possibility that there could be process changes that would create opportunities for increased interaction with the public, which would be important, particularly at this time of increased vaccine hesitancy. And these changes would promote inclusion, transparency, and increased program education. And when we meet again, we're going to confirm exactly what the work group's purpose is, which is probably going to be to consider potential process changes that we will present to the new HHS secretary. And Martha Toomey can take over at that point.
Well, I have a question.
Sure.
Have Annie scheduled the next meeting?
No, I don't think we have a next meeting scheduled yet.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Alexandra, for the report, and thank you, Martha, for agreeing to chair, John for the vice chair, and Alexandra for the secretary. It takes a lot of people to get the work group going, so thank you for being willing to help. The next item on our agenda is a report from the Division of Injury Compensation Programs. Dr. Nair, are you available and ready?
I'm ready. Thank you.
That's great.
So I'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for the opportunity to present. Good morning to everybody. I'm Narayan Nair, the Division Director for the Division of Injury Compensation Programs. And just some highlights of today's meetings. You'll be receiving an update from myself about HRSA's VICP activities. You'll receive an update from the Department of Justice Vaccine Litigation Office. And then you'll receive some updates from ACCV ex officio members, including FDA, CDC, NIH, and NVPO. To start off with, I wanted to touch upon the number of petitions filed. This is up to date as of June 4th, 2018. And the average annual number of petitions filed from fiscal years 2008 to 2012 was around 410. And as we've discussed previously, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of claims filed since then. In fiscal year 2013, it was 504 claims. By fiscal year 2015, it was 803. And in fiscal year 2017, the number had risen to 1,243. Thus far, in fiscal year 2018, we've received 783 claims. And just as a refresher, the federal fiscal year starts October 1st and concludes September 30th the next year. So it doesn't correspond with the calendar year. And this slide shows graphically basically the numbers I just discussed. These are the non-autism claims that were filed with VICP, and you can see this steady increase over recent years up to the point that we now have over 1,200 claims for last fiscal year. And then this slide shows the 5-year trend in the number of claims that have been filed versus the administrative funding. And so for 2013, the number of claims filed was 504. Our administrative funding, and this is funding just for HRSA to administer the program and review the claims, was $6.48 million at that time. In 2014, the number of claims was 633, and that was a 26% increase from the previous year. Our administrative funding went down slightly to $6.46 million. That was a 0.2% decrease. 2015, the number of claims filed was 803. That was a 27% increase from the previous year in 2014. Administrative funding also increased to $7.5 million, which represented a 16% increase in funding from the previous year. In 2016, we had another jump in the number of claims that were filed. This was 1,120. That was a nearly 40% increase in the number of claims from the previous year. Our administrative funding remained stable at $7.5 million. In 2017, the number of claims filed was, as I mentioned, 1,243. This was an 11% increase from the previous year, and the funding was increased $7.75 million. This was a 3% increase. Thus far, as of May 1st, 2018, the claims filed was 679, and the administrative funding that we received for this fiscal year after Congress passed the budget was $9.2 million, and this represented a 19% increase. And then the next slide shows the number of claims awaiting review. And this essentially summarizes our backlog. As you recall, I previously presented a slide last meeting. At that time, we had a significant number of claims that were filed in fiscal year 2017 that were awaiting review. I'm happy to report that those have been assigned for review. And I did want to define this term, that column, claims awaiting review. These are claims that were filed with medical records that are assigned to a medical officer. So this wouldn't necessarily capture claims that were filed where there were no medical records. And and I mentioned in 2017, all those claims have been assigned for medical review. In 2018, we have 559 claims that are awaiting assignment here for medical review by HRSA medical officers. And so essentially that's the backlog. This again is the fiscal year. So if a claim was filed in November 2018, November 2017, that still could be a claim that's awaiting assignment because that would be represented in the fiscal year 2018. And also, occasionally when claims are assigned for review, the medical review determines that additional medical records are needed, so sometimes the review isn't able to go forward. So I did want to just add that caveat as well. And then I wanted to go through the award amounts that are paid, and this slide is up to date as of June 4th, 2018. For last fiscal year, 2017, petitioners' awards were $252 million, and attorneys' fees and costs was $29 million. This far in this fiscal year, petitioners' awards is a little over $130 million, and attorneys' fees is $19 million. Next, I was going to go through the number of adjudications. Fiscal year 2017, 696 claims were determined to be compensable. 181 were dismissed, and that's a total of 877. So roughly 80% of claims that were adjudicated that fiscal year were compensated. And that number is very similar to the 2016 numbers. For this fiscal year, as of June 4th, we have 288 claims that have been compensable, 117 have been dismissed, and that's a total of 405. And this slide provides a little bit more detail about the adjudication categories for non-autism claims. It actually summarizes from fiscal year 2016, 2017, and 2018. I'll start off with the 2017 numbers. These, again, the compensable was 696. Of those, 183 were due to concession, where HHS conceded that the vaccine caused the injury. 46 or 7% were court decision, and 467 or 67% were settlement. 173 were non-compensable, and the adjudication total is 869. For FY18, the numbers are slightly different than the previous slide because we actually included up to June 14th. The previous slide, I believe, was June 4th. The compensable was 315, concessions 111, court decisions 61, and settlements was 143, 46%. Non-compensable was 100, and our adjudication total is 415.
Hey, Narayan, Dino, I have a question.
Sure.
On the slide 9, I'm trying to do the math on the fly here, and maybe I'm not doing it very well, but looks like the ratio for fiscal year 18 of compensable to non-compensable is different maybe from the two prior years. Maybe looks like a smaller percentage is being compensable. Do I have that right?
I think you might be correct. We haven't noticed any. I can't say that there's any particular trend or anything, okay, particularly since we're dealing with kind of partial the fiscal year. In addition, these are claims that were probably filed in 2016, 2017, perhaps earlier, because as you know, it takes a while between when a claim is filed and when it's adjudicated. So we haven't noted any particular trend, and we'll see, I guess, after we have the entire fiscal year to compare. 2016, as you can see, in 2017, the numbers were very similar.
Right. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Sure.
Dr. Nick, may I interrupt and ask a question too?
Sure.
Cody. Yep. And I just wanted to clarify the wording that you used in the adjudication column. You said that it was conceded that the vaccine caused the injury. I thought that you did not use that word, that you felt that there was an association that justified an award but didn't agree that the vaccine caused the injury. Am I incorrect?
Yeah, well, the definition of concession is HHS concludes that the petition should be compensated, and that's based on a review of the an analysis of the evidence, including the medical records and the scientific literature. So basically what HHS has concluded, it is more likely than not that the vaccine caused the injury, or that the evidence supports that it fulfills the table of the vaccine injury table. I'm sorry, fulfills the criteria of the vaccine injury table. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep. Okay. Yep. No, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
This is Martha. I have two questions. On slide 4, one of the things our work group is trying to what we're concentrating on is increasing the budget. And I noticed that in 2018 that the percentage budget was 19% went up. Number one, do we know why 2018 the budget went up 19%? And how is that going to help us as we're asking for more funding? If somebody could say, well, we just gave you extra funding. I'm not sure how it went from, it looks like we had one pretty healthy bump there. Can you explain that?
So you're asking how we got the bump?
Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially, Congress ultimately decides that, how much money the program gets, and then the president signs off on the budget. So that's done in sort of the budget process when they assess a program's needs and determine how much money each federal program is going to get. Our money comes from the vaccine injury trust fund, but Congress makes the ultimate determination on what.
But politically, I mean, I know we're not allowed to talk about politics, but something happened, and somebody, it just doesn't get put in the budget. Somebody has to support it and put it in there and get it to work and walk it through. And so I'm wondering why 2016 there was 0% change, 2018 there's a 19%. I mean, I understand the whole process of it, but why? How did that happen? I mean, did something change? Did the Department of Health, did the Secretary personally push that? Did a member of Congress personally push that? How did that occur? And I'm asking because that's one of the recommendations our work group wants to, that's one of the things that we're working on is increased budgeting. So how did this occur?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I'm not aware of the Secretary making a public statement regarding our program and needs of resources. I'm not aware of anyone in the legislative branch also making those type of statements. So yeah, I honestly don't know. What I can tell you is that we basically, as you know, we share all our programmatic statistics and data, and ultimately it goes to the legislative branch to determine the budget and the sign.
Well, I think it would be helpful for our work group if one of the things we're working on is increased funding. It would be helpful to know how did we already get increased funding. I would be curious about that. And then my second question is, because people are very confused about this, and I was hoping that you could clarify. In several of the, for example, slide 8 and other slides, we often talked in the Commission of non-autism claims. Non-autism is mentioned in several of these pages. Could you clarify for anyone who's either listening or it might be confused by that, what do you mean by non-autism? Are there autism cases? What does that mean? Because that's a pretty loaded conversation, as you know. So can we clarify what, for number 8, adjudication categories for non-autism claims. Can we clarify what we mean by that?
Sure, and that's a good question. I'm happy to answer it. So when we were going through our caseload and presenting the slides, as you know, in the early 2000s, there was a number of claims that were filed alleging that autism had caused, or vaccines had caused autism, and there were several thousand of these claims. Ultimately, through the omnibus autism proceeding, those claims were dismissed. And so when we are trying to show our workload, oftentimes we have this non-autism claims, and our intent is only to show basically the claims that we're receiving. And if I were to show, for instance, I think we have a sort of our graph. If we were to include the autism claims on this slide, for instance, we'd see a big spike in the early 2000s of several thousand claims that would sort of distort the view, and those claims ultimately didn't require medical review because they ultimately were dismissed. So to sort of show the claims that are undergoing medical review, we often divide it up by autism and non-autism claims, because otherwise, if we didn't do that, it would sort of show actually that we've had a decreased workload, which wouldn't be necessarily accurate.
Dr. Nair, this is John Howie. Very quickly, just following up on Martha's questions, there was a $1.7 million bump in the budget for fiscal year, I guess, 17, is that right?
For fiscal year 18, which started October 1st, the way the budget worked for this fiscal year is there was and this isn't just for HRSA, this is for the entire government, is there was a number of continuing resolutions until there was a determination of what the final budget would be. So that money actually fully became available to us really in the spring after Congress passed the full fiscal year budget.
Is there a plan, is there already a plan for next year's budget, fiscal year 19?
Yeah, we have not heard. We don't, generally the way the budget making process is that's Congress determines the budget, the President signs off on it. We don't necessarily, we're not the ones that determine that. So I'm not aware of any plan. I haven't heard any proposals for what the funding would be for our program for next fiscal year.
Okay, yeah, and you summarized that better than I did. That's kind of what I was asking. Has the budget for next year been set, and do we know whether it's the same or there's more or there's less? And it sounds like the answer is no. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. And just to highlight, I have the numbers. It was an increase of $1.45 million over fiscal year 2018, and in 2017 we did get a bump of $250,000. So
it would just be, this is Martha again, it would just be really helpful for our work, our committee, the subcommittee, or whatever we want to call it, if we knew who was walking our water up in the legislative process, because somebody did something and was helpful. And although we are not, as commission members, allowed to lobby or discuss politics, something happened that, you got a 19% increase. It'd be nice to know how that occurred.
Yeah,
somebody's walking our water.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up and that comment. And I'm not trying to avoid the question. It's just as a civil servant and in the federal government, it's really tough. I can't really, and I honestly don't know if there was an individual or a group of individuals that proposed this. And again, you mentioned sort of the not lobbying. We don't go in front and say that we need this money or we must have this amount. So that's why we're sort of not able to sort of get to that.
But as we as the work group are asking for an increased budget, it only makes logical sense to find out how we already got one. That would make sense, to find out how it already happened.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Cody. Can I go back one more question? I apologize.
No problem.
So can you tell us, this is a list of non-autism claims. Is it reasonable to assume that there are no autism claims at the present time?
Those autism claims, for the most part, have been dismissed, but I think we get a small handful, and I want to say it's relatively small, and I would say probably single digits.
Yes. Okay. So it's pretty much dropped off the radar.
For the most part, those have been dismissed, yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Dr. Nair, this is Beth. I just had a quick question on the increase of 19%. Is it known how that extra funding will be utilized?
Sure, yeah. The vast majority of that funding is going to be utilized to try and expedite the review of claims and reduce the increase in the backlog. I can't say that we'll see a significant, I'm not sure if we'll see a significant decrease in the backlog, but our hope is to sort of slow the increase in the backlog. And it all depends on the number of claims that are filed. But that's what that 19%, our intent is to use that for.
Awesome. Thank you.
Does that mean hiring legal assistants or more lawyers? Or?
Well, this budget just really is focused on HRSA. And our role is to review the claims and make a recommendation, and the Department of Justice represents us in court. So from our perspective, what we would use this 19% is to improve and increase staffing to review the claims and decrease the wait time and the backlog.
Okay. Okay.
Sure.
Dr. Nair, this is John Howie. One more question, if you don't mind.
No, no problem.
Is the backlog, you just said slow the backlog, and I just want to kind of drill into that. Is the backlog continuing to grow, or is it now staying about the same?
What I can say, and again, the way the budget process worked, the budget was passed, I believe, I want to say in March of this year. So this funding, our year funding became available to us in the spring. And I can say pretty high degree of certainty that the backlog, it really has remained stable since then. Now it is always going to fluctuate. It's based on, how many claims we get, and if we get a large number over a short period of time, we might see it increase. But for the most part, since the spring, we have seen that remain stable.
Is the backlog, we discussed this at the last meeting, is the backlog reflecting the SERVA, the flu vaccine cases? Is that being reflected in there, the claims waiting review?
Yeah, the majority of claims in the backlog are adult claims related to the seasonal flu, and many of them are alleging a SERVA injury.
Okay.
Narayan, it's Dino again. I got one more follow-up for you, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no problem.
It goes back to Cody's question about what a conceded case means or what concession means. And I think I heard you to say that it essentially means one of two things. Either it looks like the evidence shows that the claimant meets the criteria for the table, or it shows that the vaccine more likely than not caused the alleged injury. And if I misstated what you said, then you should let me know. But as regards that second category, that the determination is that the vaccine more likely than not caused the injury, if indeed that was the second category, is that a medical judgment by the doctors that it's more likely than not in their medical opinion, or is that a judgment that they are predicting that based on the evidence of that claim, if it were to be adjudicated, the finding would be that there's compensation? Because it strikes me those could be two very different things.
I think I would say for the concession, that's predominantly determined by medical factors, by the medical officer's opinion in that more likely than not.
Okay. All right.
Actually, I think I have a couple more slides, but I'm happy to take any more questions if there's questions about. Sometimes it's easier to take questions as you go along. So if there's questions about anything I presented forward previously, let me know. Otherwise, I can go ahead and conclude, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and go through the trust fund, and the balance as of March 31st is $3.7 billion. From October 1st to March 31st, the activity, the excise tax revenue was $136 million. The interest on investments was $32 million, and the total income was $168 million. So the interest as a percentage of total income was 19%. And the source for this data is the U.S. Treasury. And then I wanted to briefly update you on some of the other activities that we've been involved with. We issued a notice of proposed rulemaking on April 4th, 2018, and this was to add the category of vaccines recommended for pregnant women to the vaccine injury table, and was published this was published in the Federal Registry. We're going to hold a public hearing September 17th, and this will provide the public an opportunity to comment on this NPRM. And this, as you recall, was part of the 21st Century Cures Act, and we discussed this addition, and ACCV voted on how to proceed to add these this category to the vaccine injury table. We're continuing to engage in a wide array of outreach activities as we can. On April 24th, we provided an overview of our program to managers of the HRSA regional offices so that they can inform grantees about the program. So this was an audience of HRSA staff that actually are stationed all across the country that interact with state and local partners. And our goal was to make them aware of the program so that as they talk to grantees that they work with in local communities, they can pass that knowledge along.
This is Martha. I have a question about something we never talk about on slide 9. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And can you explain to us how it's able to be safely deposited and kept there and not moved from the trust fund to, say, pay for highway transportation or something? How is that $3.7 billion kept in a safe locked box and not transferred to another part of the federal budget? Can you explain that to us?
Yeah,
it's a lot of money.
Yeah, the trust fund is managed by the U.S. Treasury, which manages, I think, almost all the entire federal, U.S. government money, which is, a huge amount. So as I understand it, and I'm not an accountant, but as I understand it, they have this, and you can go to the Treasury website and they list the balance of the trust fund and they list all this data that I presented. And so I think they have safeguards in place to make sure that the money stayed there. And by statute, this trust fund can only be used to administer our program, to be used to fund the court, to fund the Department of Justice and their needs, and to pay petitioners and attorneys' fees.
Who's in charge of that statute?
In charge of the statute was...
Who could change it? Who could change it?
Oh, could change the statute? That would have to be a legislation passed by Congress and signed by the President.
So that could happen. Theoretically, it could happen.
Theoretically, yeah. There's nothing that would prevent that from happening if Congress were to decide to use this funding for something else. But it would, I think, in the 30 years,
things are different
any
now.
change of this part of the statute.
Things are different now. It could happen. It's just a statute that's money's just protected by legislative activity up on the Hill and the White House. So that's what protects it. That's it. I just wanted to make that point. That's all.
Sure. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, it could happen.
Yep. Dr. Nair, one more small question, if I may. On September 17th from 10 to 11:30, there's going to be an opportunity for public comment regarding the maternal immunization provisions. Will that be online, or will it be possible for people to listen into that? Do you know?
Yeah, absolutely. People, it'll be just like this meeting. People will announce it. We'll have a call-in number. People from the public can express their opinion in support, or if they have issues with the NPRM. And then we announce this, well ahead of time to give people time to prepare and block out their schedule. And we do this for, when we did the last revision for the vaccine injury table, we had a similar format.
I assume that is ADA compliant, that someone who's hearing impaired, or that we accommodate all, someone's blind or whatever. I'm assuming that public hearing can accommodate everyone.
Yeah, as I understand it, it is compliant that people will be able to access it.
Okay.
Dr. Nair, this is Beth. Can I ask a question about the number of claims filed? You mentioned at one point that the majority of claims filed are adults. It involves the seasonal flu, and some of those involve SERVA. I was just wondering if it's possible, just maybe for future reference, that whenever the number of claims filed, rather than having them all together, if we could have a column to the side that just says, okay, so in 2017 there were 1,243 claims filed, and of those, this is how many were adults involving the seasonal flu and SERVA injuries, because I think that's the majority of them, isn't it?
It's definitely a significant proportion of them. So, yeah, we can provide that data. Sure, we'd be happy to do that.
Dr. Mayer, this is John Howie. Just in looking through the book, I think that a lot of that data is broken out maybe by the DOJ presentation.
Yeah, I know their presentation goes into a level of detail about cases, particularly of those that have been adjudicated. And then on our website, we have a data and statistics page that sort of lists by vaccines alleged. I don't think we have anything on the website that talks about alleged SERVA injuries, but we could certainly put a slide together to provide you that information if you find that helpful.
Yeah, I think John's point, this is Martha, John's point is that in the next presentation, it's adjudicated settlements on her slide 11. We're obviously, and it's very detailed about, but it's adjudicated settlements, not
claims filed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves, so whatever.
And I think I covered everything. I did want to close with some information about our agency, HRSA. The Vaccine Injury Compensation Program is just one of many programs in HRSA that impacts Americans' daily lives. HRSA supports poison control centers. HRSA works on organ transplantation programs. There's a lot of work being done right now on the opioid epidemic. So there's a lot of work outside the vaccine world. And HRSA also supports community health centers where a lot of Americans are able to get their care. And if you're interested in learning more about these activities, you can visit the HRSA website, and they have a number of social media outlets as well that you can follow. So just wanted to conclude on that, and I'm happy to take any other questions. These are great questions. I'm happy to take additional questions if there's anything that I didn't cover or answer already. Okay, I think we'll move on then.
Thank you, Dr. Nair. Next is a report from the Department of Justice. Catherine Reeves.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to present to the Commission today. I'm going to present some information based on our reporting period, which is different than the one that HHS uses. It's from February 16th of this year through May 15th of this year. Moving to my slide 2, this shows the total petitions filed in the Court of Federal Claims. This reporting period was 263, of which 240 were for adults and 23 were for minors. I'll just note that compared with the last reporting period, that this is 9 less petitions filed. That was for between November 15th and November 16th and February 15th of 2018. Moving on to the next slide, shows the total petitions adjudicated during this reporting period was 147. And of these, 113 were compensated, 43 through concession, and then there were 70 cases that were not conceded by HHS. And then there were 34 that were not compensated or dismissed. Those were all non-OAP claims. And I'll just note in comparison with the previous reporting period, that's 34 less cases adjudicated, 29 less compensated, and 5 less that were not compensated or dismissed. I don't have an explanation for that. I just like to note the differences between the numbers for the reporting periods. Moving on to the next slide, and I will note I just realized this morning that there's an error on this slide because at the top it says it's for November 16th, 2017 through February 15th of 18. These stats are actually from February 16th, 18 through May 15th, 18. And this just shows that the total petitions that were voluntarily withdrawn during this period were 2, which is 2 less than the last reporting period. Moving to the next slide, we had 3 decisions from the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. This is the court that gives us binding precedent in the program. And when I say binding precedent, that means that it's binding on the Court of Federal Claims and on the Office of Special Masters in cases that are similar or the same, based on the same legal theory. We had Detail, Anderson, and Galindo. Detail was a case involving an allegation of narcolepsy following flu vaccine. Anderson was a case that was based on autism, alleging autism as a result of vaccination. And Galindo was an interesting case where a petitioner sought a writ of mandamus from the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit unsuccessfully. Moving on to the next slide, we have 6 cases pending at the Federal Circuit at the moment. 3 of these, the ones that are highlighted in yellow, are new since the last reporting period. McCollum, Krakow, and Rogero. Moving on to the next slide, we had 4 decisions from the Court of Federal Claims in appeals filed by petitioners. These were all cases that were appealed on a finding of no entitlement by the special master. They were appealed, and we got decisions in all 4 of those cases during the last reporting period. And then the next slide, we received 2 decisions in cases that the respondent appealed affirmatively to the Court of Federal Claims. In McCulloch, which involved an attorney fees and costs issue, and Fairchild, which involved an interim award of damages. And I'll just note that this Fairchild decision is of concern to us because it is in contravention of one of the bases for the statute, in that under the Vaccine Act, a petitioner has to elect a remedy in order to receive a compensation award from the program. If someone is not pleased with or satisfied with the decision that they receive in their Vaccine Act case, they can reject the judgment and pursue a civil action. But if they elect to accept the decision in the case and accept the compensation award, they're precluded from pursuing a civil action for the same injury. In this case, because the Court of Federal Claims affirmed the special master's decision awarding damages on an interim basis, this raises a legal issue as to whether the petitioner is bound by the election that they filed to accept the interim damages award, and how that will figure in the future when the rest of the case, which has not been resolved, when the damages issues that remain pending before the court are resolved. So essentially it sets us up for the petitioner being required to file more than one election, or potentially choosing to reject part of the judgment in the case. So this is the 3rd decision that we've received over the last couple of years where the special masters have decided to award damages on an interim basis. The other 2 cases have fallen out on different issues, been resolved, but this case remains pending, and it is concerning to us. Moving on to the next slide, we have 7 cases pending at the U.S. Court of Federal Claims. These were all pending during the last reporting period. And the parentheticals indicates what the issues are involved in each of those cases. And then moving on to the next slide.
Can you just tell us what slide number you're on? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was on that was slide 9 that I just finished.
Thank you.
And now moving on to slide 10, we have 5 cases pending at the Court of Federal Claims in which the respondent has filed affirmative appeals. one of these cases, Boatmon, was argued at the Court of Federal Claims by our Deputy Assistant Attorney General on June 5th, 2018. Boatmon case involves an allegation that vaccines caused sudden infant death syndrome. We also, moving on to the next slide, slide 11, this shows, I mentioned the Boatmon argument that happened on June 5th. At the Federal Circuit, we had an argument in the Oliver case on June 6th, and on July 9th, we will have an argument in the DePena case. And then moving on to the next slide, this is the data that we provide every reporting period with regard to cases that have been settled, starting with the case that took the longest as far as from the date the petition was filed until judgment was entered, ending with the case that took the least amount of time to reach final judgment based on a settlement. We provide the vaccination, the alleged injury, and the amount of time. The one that took the longest was took 4 years and 3 months, and the one that took the least amount of time was 7 months. And then the rest of the slides.
Catherine, this is Dino. I have a question.
Sure, Dino.
I'm wondering about the term adjudicated settlement, and I was flipping back to the glossary quickly, and I don't think it's in there. So is that, what part of that is settled and what part of that is adjudicated?
Well, when we settle a case, we ultimately file a stipulation setting forth the terms of the settlement, which the special master adopts via a decision that results in a judgment that then goes into the stage of the case where the petitioner elects to accept or reject the judgment, and the judgment is paid. So when we refer to adjudicated settlements, these are cases that have gone to judgment and they've been accepted by the petitioners.
I see. So, and in those instances, is the special master reviewing the settlement to see if he or she agrees that it's a reasonable settlement, or is the special master essentially just taking the administrative almost step of causing it to become a judgment so that it can fit within the election contours of the statute?
The special masters do review the stipulation, and they do review it for reasonableness, and then they issue a decision adopting the stipulation, usually attaching a copy of the stipulation. So I think it is more than purely an administrative step by the special master, although I'm not aware, I don't think we've ever had any cases that we've settled and filed a stipulation in that the special master has refused to adopt it.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
This is Cody Meissner. I'm sorry. Can you just tell me, under alleged injuries, what is TM and what is CRPS?
TM is transverse myelitis,
okay,
and CRPS is complex regional pain syndrome.
They're getting imaginative.
This is Martha. You know, every meeting I always thank you for the glossary of terms. I think it's very thoughtful of you because a lot of us did not go to law school. So thank you very much for doing that. And I really appreciate how this is laid out. It's easy to read. I have a question about slide. Let's go back here. Hold on. The decided cases, appeals by petitioner, slide 5. You know, as you know, my seat is to represent parents of children who have been injured, and the number one thing we discuss is we discuss all sorts of side effects of medicine, and we all discuss vaccinations and autism. And I know it's, you know, I'm being repetitive, but on slide 5, you mentioned the Anderson case, and you mentioned the word autism. Could you please explain the Anderson case just quickly and what that entitlement was?
Sure, I can give you a brief summary.
Thank you.
Bear with me a second.
That's okay. It's okay.
All right. So this is a case in which the petitioners originally filed a short form petition for vaccine compensation in the omnibus autism proceeding, the OAP. They alleged that the MMR vaccine that their son received aggravated an underlying mitochondrial disorder which led to autism. In November of 2016, the special master denied their request for compensation, Special master determined that the petitioners did not establish that their son had mitochondrial disease or dysfunction, and that the medical record did not allow the conclusion that the child had any reaction to the MMR vaccine. So the petitioners appealed that to the Court of Federal Claims, which the special master's decision was affirmed by the chief judge of the Court of Federal Claims, and then the petitioners appealed to the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, which also appealed the special master's decision denying entitlement.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. I'm happy to answer any other questions, but other than that, I think I've given all the updates in my slides.
No other questions for Catherine? Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Our next presentation is by Dr. Jonathan Duffy, update on the Immunization Safety Office. Dr. Duffy?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. Just waiting for the slides to come up. Okay. So yes, I'll be giving an update from the Immunization Safety Office at the Centers for Disease Control. So on slide 2, we have our disclaimer. Slide 3, so in this presentation I'll be giving updates on recent presentations by staff of the Immunization Safety Office, and also reviewing recent publications that were sponsored by our office. So on the next slide, the 48th annual, 48th National Immunization Conference was held in May in Atlanta, and Immunization Safety Office staff had 4 oral presentations, one on vaccine administration errors, one on HPV vaccine, one with general updates on the activities of CDC's Immunization Office, and one on maternal vaccine safety in general. So that conference was targeted particularly people from states and people involved in immunization programs from around the country. There was also 4 posters presented there at that conference. So on the next slide, the Preventive Medicine Conference was held in May in Chicago, and ISO staff had 1 abstract accepted at that conference on unintentional administration of insulin instead of influenza vaccine. So this was a review of about 20 cases that were identified where there were administration errors related to confusion between these 2 products, and that abstract is available on the conference website. So the next slide is about an upcoming meeting next week. The Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices will be holding their meeting in Atlanta, and ISO will be providing the following updates. First will be, as part of the influenza session, there'll be an update on the routine vaccine safety surveillance done for the 2017-2018 influenza season. And there will also be a presentation on the CDC-sponsored study of narcolepsy following adjuvanted monovalent pandemic H1N1 influenza vaccines, which is known as the SOMNIA study. So that is a study that was done, it was an international study, involved data from other countries. It did not involve any U.S. licensed vaccine products or any vaccines used in the United States. In the next slide, there will also be a session on pneumococcal vaccines, and ISO will provide an update on the safety of 13-valent pneumococcal conjugate vaccine in adults aged 65 and older. And finally, there will be a session on herpes zoster vaccine, particularly regarding the new inactivated recombinant adjuvanted herpes zoster vaccine, and this will just be providing an update on plans for safety surveillance with this new vaccine. So on the next slide, next I'll talk about recent publications from the last several months. So first I want to highlight there was 1 publication from 2017 that was given an award by the Healthcare Systems Research Network. This was a vaccine safety data link study, and the paper by Carbonda et al. Entitled First Trimester Influenza Vaccination and Risk for Major Structural Birth Defects in Offspring was given the award as Paper of the Year for the Healthcare Systems Research Network. So now into more recent publications. So the first one is by Markowitz et al. It's entitled 10 Years of Human Papillomavirus Vaccination in the United States. This was published in Academic Pediatrics, and this was just a review paper talking about the experience with HPV vaccine. So it included some safety data in addition to other information about the HPV vaccination program in the last 10 years. Sorry, my slides are jumping around a little bit. Okay, so the next publication was by Irving et al., entitled Human Papillomavirus Vaccine Coverage and Prevalence of Missed Opportunities for Vaccination in an Integrated Healthcare System. This was published in Academic Pediatrics. This paper related more to HPV vaccination coverage and interventions for increasing coverage rates in a healthcare system, and it had less to do with safety findings per se. The next publication was by Glanz et al., entitled Association Between Estimated Cumulative Vaccine Antigen Exposure Through the First 23 Months of Life and Non-Vaccine Targeted Infections from 24 through 47 months of age. This was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, and this was a study basically looking at, as the title says, non-vaccine targeted infections, so basically trying to look at the effects of vaccines on infections that the vaccines are not intended to do anything to prevent, and basically they found there was no significant difference in the outcomes between people who had different levels of vaccine antigen exposure. Next is a paper by Daly et al. Entitled Assessing Potential Confounding and Misclassification Bias when Studying the Safety of the Childhood Immunization Schedule. This was published in Academic Pediatrics. And so this study was basically looking at more of some methodologic assessment and the quality of vaccine data in some of our partners in the Vaccine Safety Data Link, just looking at agreement between vaccination records and parent-reported vaccination status of children, and basically also included whether people with asthma risk factors had any differences. So again, no new safety findings per se. The next publication was by Liang et al., and this is a publication, recommendations from the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. So this is a CDC publication that is updated periodically, and this includes a review of safety data relevant to the pertussis, tetanus, and diphtheria vaccines. So again, this document doesn't contain new information, but it's just a review of previous information. The next publication was by Miller et al., and this is entitled Post-Licensure Safety Surveillance of Zoster Vaccine Live, Zostavax, in the United States, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System 2006 to 2015. So this paper was a comprehensive review of reports to VAERS regarding adverse events after Zostavax. So that's a nice summary of 10 years worth of data. But basically the results were reassuring and didn't identify any new safety concerns that were not previously known. Next is a paper by Donahue et al., and this was a response to 3 letters to the editor regarding Donahue's previous publication on association of spontaneous abortion with receipt of an activated influenza vaccine containing H1N1 pandemic 09 in the 2010-11 and 2011-12 seasons. The original paper was published in Vaccine. This was a response to letters to the editor that had originated after the original paper. And just to briefly summarize again, the original paper had found an association between receipt of inactivated influenza vaccine and spontaneous abortion, but they were clear that this was a case control study that did not establish causation, just an association. And this did stimulate some interest in some letters to the editor about the results and methods, and the authors responded to that with some additional information. And that concludes my update, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
This is Martha. Thank you, Dr. Duffy. I have a silly question because we don't have it with any other of the presentations. On slide 2, why is there a disclaimer since all this CDC information, and I don't understand the disclaimer because none of our other presenters seem to have that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's necessary. That is the CDC standard disclaimer that is put on any documents that do not represent the official agency position, such as a MMWR publication or something like that. So I don't actually know if that's necessary for this presentation, but we just tend to include it.
Okay. And then on slide 6, the mention of the influenza and narcolepsy. Do we have any data on the narcolepsy with the flu vaccine?
Yes, so we have several studies. So again, the original concerns were identified in Europe, and there have been many studies done in Europe and in various countries that have looked at the vaccines that were used in Europe. For the vaccines that were used in the United States, our office has done both a review of the vaccine adverse event reporting system and did not find any concerns regarding the pattern reports there. We also had a study that was done in our vaccine safety data link season that did not find any indication of association between the pandemic vaccines used in the United States and narcolepsy. So again, at this time, the evidence mostly seems to be related to vaccines that were used in other countries.
So does that include the study that they did in Finland, or is that too old of a study?
No, I mean, all these studies have been done since the 2009 pandemic, so we are approaching, 9 years of investigation into this topic. So yeah, there is continuing to be ongoing study, and I think, different countries have evaluated their own programs. So yes, Finland has published things in the past, and I think I've seen, they published things like, from several years ago, and they published some more recent things where they're continuing to investigate that putative association.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Duffy? All right, thank you, Dr. Duffy.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention that if any of the commissioners are interested in reading more, a copy of every single article was emailed out just this morning by Annie. So we have PDF copies of all of the articles that Dr. Duffy reviewed. All right, our next presentation, update on the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Claire Schuster. Claire?
Great, hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Okay, excellent. So today I have a few updates for NIH, and let's see if I can click to the next slide. Just move down since it's a PDF. And most of our updates today relate to influenza. So we'll start out talking about H7N9 influenza vaccine trials. In March, NIAID launched 2 new clinical trials testing an inactivated 2017 H7N9 influenza vaccine manufactured by Sanofi Pasteur. And these 2 trials that are underway are being conducted by the NIAID-funded network of Vaccine and Treatment Evaluation Units, also known as the VTEUs, and they are currently enrolling participants at sites across the U.S. Combined, these trials are expected to enroll up to 570 volunteers between the ages of 19 and 64, and up to 300 volunteers over 65 years of age. One of the trials is testing different dosages of the inactivated influenza vaccine candidate with or without the AS03 adjuvant, which is manufactured by GSK. This trial is being conducted at VTEU sites in Georgia, Iowa, Maryland, North Carolina, and Washington. The second trial is testing this vaccine candidate with adjuvant when co-administered with seasonal influenza vaccine. And this trial is being conducted at VTEU sites and one affiliated site in Alabama, Maryland, Ohio, and Tennessee. And throughout my presentation today, you'll hear about a couple different efforts underway at the VTEUs. NIAID funded previous research on an earlier version of the H7N9 vaccine. The new vaccine candidate uses an inactivated form of H7N9 influenza virus collected in 2017. To increase the likelihood that the vaccine will provide immunity against a newly evolved strain of H7N9. For my next slide, researchers have found that influenza vaccines that better target the influenza surface protein called neuraminidase, or NA, could offer broad protection against various influenza virus strains and lessen the severity of illness. Current seasonal influenza vaccines mainly target a different, more abundant influenza surface protein called hemagglutinin. Because influenza vaccines offer varying and sometimes limited protection, scientists are always exploring ways to improve vaccine effectiveness. This new research builds on previous studies of NA and was conducted by a team of scientists, including investigators from the NIAID-supported Centers of Excellence for Influenza Research and Surveillance, known as the CEERS program. The authors note that their findings suggest that influenza vaccines should be optimized to better target NA for broad protection against diverse influenza strains. And this article by Chen et al. Was published in Cell in April. Continuing with our theme of influenza, at the last ACCV meeting, Dr. Mullick from NIH discussed NIAID's new strategic plan for developing a universal influenza vaccine. A universal influenza vaccine is a vaccine that can provide durable protection for all age groups against multiple influenza strains, including those that might cause a pandemic. To develop a universal influenza vaccine, NIAID will focus on 3 key research areas shown here on the slide: improving the understanding of the transmission, natural history, and pathogenesis of influenza infection, precisely characterizing how protective influenza immunity occurs and how to tailor vaccination responses to achieve it, and supporting the rational design of a universal influenza vaccine, including designing new immunogens and adjuvants to boost immunity and extend the duration of protection. And the strategic plan was published in the Journal of Infectious Diseases in February. In May, NIAID launched a clinical trial testing a universal influenza vaccine candidate intended to protect against multiple strains of the virus. The trial is testing an experimental vaccine called M001 for safety and its ability to produce potentially broad protective immune responses, both on its own and when followed by a licensed seasonal influenza vaccine. The M001 vaccine candidate was developed and produced by BeyondVax Pharmaceuticals in Israel. The experimental vaccine contains components known as antigenic peptide sequences that are shared among many different influenza viruses. So theoretically, it could protect against many current and emerging strains of influenza. 6 previous clinical trials conducted by BeyondVax in Israel and Europe indicated that the vaccine candidate was safe, well tolerated, and produced an immune response to a broad range of influenza strains. This new study will enroll up to 120 healthy volunteers between the ages of 18 and 49 years of age. The study is being conducted at 4 U.S. sites that are part of our VTEUs. Participants will be enrolled at the Baylor College of Medicine, the University of Iowa, and Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. Laboratory support will be provided by St. Louis University. NIAID is working to refine its infectious disease clinical research networks to better implement clinical trial protocols for testing experimental vaccines, biologics, therapeutics, diagnostics, and devices. Currently, there are 9 NIAID-funded VTEUs based in the United States. Every 7 years, NIAID competitively renews its funding for the VTEUs. For the fiscal year 2020 awards, NIAID envisions some changes to the VTEU structure to allow for efficient implementation of clinical trial protocols and to create a leadership group and operations center that will be central to carrying out NIAID's infectious disease clinical trial priorities. We recently hosted a webinar on NIAID's vision for the VTEU structure moving forward. The webinar is available at this link on YouTube. We welcome your input and feedback on this approach. If you have any comments or questions, please email them to vteu2020@niaid.nih.gov. I also have an update on NIH's All of Us research program, which opened to national enrollment on May 6th. People ages 18 and older, regardless of health status, will be able to enroll. As I've mentioned at previous meetings, the overall aim is to enroll 1 million or more volunteers and oversample communities that have been underrepresented in research to make the program the largest, most diverse resource of its kind. And the goal is to help advance individualized prevention, treatment, and care of people for all backgrounds. By partnering with 1 million people who share information about themselves over many years, the All of Us research program will enable research to more precisely prevent and treat a variety of health conditions. Participants are asked to share different types of health and lifestyle information, including online surveys and data from electronic health records, which will continue to be collected over the course of the program. And moving forward in the future, children will be able to enroll, and the program will include additional data types such as genetic data. And I will see if I can pull up a short video about the program. All right. Looks like the link isn't working, unfortunately. But I do have one final update of a press release that just came out yesterday. So NIAID has launched a clinical trial of an investigational vaccine designed to protect against RSV, respiratory syncytial virus. This phase 1 study will enroll a small group of healthy adults to examine the safety of an experimental intranasal vaccine and its ability to induce an immune response. The study is being conducted at one of our VTEUs at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center and is expected to enroll up to 25 healthy non-pregnant volunteers between the ages of 18 and 45. The vaccine candidate is known as SEVRSV and was developed by researchers at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and manufactured by Children's GMP LLC of St. Jude's. And that concludes my presentation for today, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Claire, this is Beth. When you're talking about the video, the link that wouldn't work, is it the one on the bottom of the slide that says allofus.nih.gov? Is it that one?
So the first link, the allofus.nih.gov, is the main website for the All of Us research program. Okay. The YouTube video is a short promotional video for All of Us. So I was trying to click on the All of Us anthem. That wasn't opening.
Gotcha. Okay. If there are no more questions for Claire, thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
We are running about 35 minutes ahead of schedule. So I just need to know what the commissioners want to do. Valerie Marshall is available and on the line. We were not scheduled to have Valerie's presentation until 1 o'clock, but is it okay with everyone if we continue on while we've got Valerie available?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah,
Right.
Sounds great.
All right, then our next presentation will be by Valerie Marshall. Valerie, thank you for doing this a little early for us.
Oh, my pleasure. I will advance the slides as I go. So good morning, I'm Commander Valerie Marshall, and I will provide the Food and Drug Administration update this morning. In April 2018, the FDA approved a supplement to the Biologics License Application for Zoster Vaccine Live to revise the package insert to include data from an interim analysis of an observational study that support longer-term effectiveness of Zostavax in individuals 50 years of age and older. And this study was done to fulfill requirements of a post-marketing commitment. In April 2018, the FDA approved a supplement to the biologics license application for Japanese encephalitis vaccine. To update the package insert with immunogenicity and safety data from long-term pediatric clinical studies, and to also include a recommendation for a booster dose at 11 months after completion of the primary vaccination series for individuals less than 17 years of age who are at risk of continued exposure or re-exposure to Japanese encephalitis virus. In April 2018, the FDA approved a supplement to the biologics license application for Haemophilus B conjugate vaccine to update the package insert to include safety and effectiveness data from the booster phase of study HIB 097 that verify and describe the clinical benefit of Hibrix administered as a booster dose for active immunization. On May 17, 2018, the Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee met to discuss approaches for demonstrating effectiveness of Group B streptococcus vaccines intended for use in pregnant women to protect the newborn infant. GBS is a significant cause of early infant morbidity and mortality in the United States and globally. GBS is a leading cause of neonatal sepsis and meningitis in many countries and an important cause of disease in pregnant women, as well as in immunocompromised adults and the elderly. Several regulatory issues are involved in the development of GBS vaccines. One issue is that these vaccines would be the first vaccines to be developed specifically for use in pregnant women, and the regulatory pathway also will impact the approach of additional vaccines developed for pregnancy. Among other questions, the committee opined on additional clinical disease endpoints that could be considered to demonstrate vaccine effectiveness. The committee mentioned Group B strep-related stillbirths, maternal disease, preterm death, neonatal encephalopathy, and sepsis as important aspects to consider. The FDA is continuing to be engaged with our interagency partners and medical product developers to advance the development of vaccines for Ebola. FDA has been in close contact with our interagency partners, medical product developers, the WHO, and our international regulatory counterparts to help advance response efforts in the Democratic Republic of Congo. FDA is supporting these efforts primarily by providing scientific and regulatory support to the WHO. This concludes my report, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Valerie. Commissioners, in looking at the remainder of the agenda for today, we will not receive a presentation from the National Vaccine Program Office. Let's see, I think we're about 30 minutes ahead of time. I think what I would recommend is that we move forward to allowing public comments and then future agenda items and then adjourning before lunch. Is that okay with everybody?
Sure.
Yeah. Sure, that's fine.
Yep, sounds good.
This is Martha. As you know, yeah, that's great. But I have a question about our responsibility about the public comment. That it does say 1:30, and are we doing something sort of? So I don't know how to say this, but what if somebody doesn't? What if somebody has planned their day to check in with us at 1, and they've got a public comment for 1:30, and how do we accommodate that? What's our answer to that? I mean, I know it says on our agenda it may commence earlier or later. I agree that we should continue and move on, but I'm just worried about the fact that we have advertised, I use that word, you know, we have said publicly that it's 1:30 is public comment. Annie, do you have an answer to that?
I do. It is listed in the Federal Register notice that public comment will be taken after the last day's presentation. So that kind of gives us, you know, the flexibility if the meeting's running early or later that we can take public comment, you know, whenever that happens. It's also listed on the agenda.
Okay.
And we can accept public comments for the meeting even after it has ended. So if someone was to reach out, they can send us their public comment in writing, and we'll forward that and include it in the next meeting.
So if someone were to call the 800 number thinking that they were calling in on time, is that 800 number going to still be active until 1:30?
No. Once we end the call, once the leader ends the call, it ends for the day.
Okay.
But there are no objections to moving on to public comment at this time?
No.
Okay. Carolyn, are you still on the line?
Yes, ma'am.
We would like to be able to open the line for public comments.
Okay. I'll go ahead and give them the instructions. At this time, for public comment, please press *1 and record your first name. Again, for public comment, please press *1. One moment. And again, as a reminder, if you'd like to make a comment at this time, please press *1. Ma'am, I'm showing no comments or questions at this time.
Thank you. Okay, as we move into future agenda items and new business, we'd like to give Ann Aiken just a moment to introduce herself. She's the new representative from the National Vaccine Program Office. Ann, are you on the line?
I am. Good morning. As stated, my name is Ann Aiken. I work at the National Vaccine Program Office as a communications director, and I'll be taking over for Corinne Bach. I've also previously worked at CDC and FDA, and I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and I'm thrilled to be able to join you guys as an ex officio member. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Any questions? Does anyone have any questions for Ann? Okay. Well, let's talk about future agenda items. Any new business that we need to discuss? Does anyone have any recommendations?
I have a question about, speaking of our roster. Annie, what is the status of our vacant position? Do we have anyone who's being vetted, or how are we doing on that one?
Hi, Martha. We have received nominations, and we'll be sending a package forward for approval.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or new business? Anything that we need to make sure is on the agenda for the next meeting, which, by the way, the next one is scheduled for September 6th and 7th, and the last meeting of the year is scheduled for December 6th and 7th.
Is there any chance that either one of these would be in person?
Annie?
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility. I mean, it would really depend on the agenda and, the commission's wishes.
Right. Well, I just really firmly believe that, and I've said this pretty much at every meeting, that we need to be in person because we're a commission that is representing diverse, sometimes opposing positions. And I think that when you're discussing things like this, it's much easier to be, and more honest, to be in a room together and to be able to exchange ideas. Doing it this way, it fulfills our requirements, but it's so much easier to get things successfully accomplished if you're together in the room. I really don't approve of these phone meetings, and I would really like to find a way to do them in person. Now, I understand that many of us have time constraints and can't get down to D.C. on a regular basis, but at least, I would think that December, at least September or December, we should make an effort to do it in person. It's particularly difficult for Beth who for people who fly in from, long distances. But I just really believe we should be together.
Well, this is Cody Meissner. If I can comment, I must say I really appreciate the opportunity to do it via a conference call. I understand Martha's point. It's always nice to be face to face, but it is so much less time consuming, and I think we can get just as much done this way. So just one thought about the opposing, about another way of looking at it.
I completely agree, Cody, that it is much easier to do it this way, but maybe we could, if we make a plan that once a year at least that we're together, I think it's a more cohesive, successful commission that way. I agree with you completely. But it would be nice if we could get together at least once a year.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. We do try and do one. In fact, I'm pretty certain in recent years we've done at a minimum once a year, predominantly at least twice a year. And we take a number of things that come into play, certainly the commissioner's wishes and schedules. Also, funding issues sometimes come into play. And then also, one thing we do try and do is if we know that we're going to be bringing on a new commissioner, we really try and hold our in-person meeting at a time when they start. We think that's really helpful for their orientation and things. So there have been times where we've sort of delayed having the in-person meeting when we knew that we were going to have new people on board, because we think that that's a nice way to bring them on is an in-person, and then they can do the orientation and meet with the court and the DOJs.
I found that super helpful.
Oh, yeah. It was helpful.
So we'll need to get some information and work on if the next meeting or the December meeting is going to be in person. And then from the work group report, it sounds like the next meeting isn't scheduled as of yet, but I know that they've been trying to work and get together as often as time permits. So we look forward to having another update from them at the next meeting. Anything else that we need to add to the next agenda?
This is Martha. I just wanted to thank everybody. I'm going to cry now. For being so thoughtful in the last 3 or 4 months since the hurricane and us having to sell our house and move our lives and start anew. Annie has especially been very, very kind, and I very much appreciate the thoughtfulness. It's been a very rough 9 months since the hurricane, and it's changed our whole lives. Everything's different now, and hopefully it'll be for the better. But thank you for standing by me and kind of understanding why I wasn't quite as attentive as I usually am. Thank you.
And I want to second the bravo for Annie. Bravo, Annie.
Bravo, Annie.
It's a standing ovation.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice of you guys to say.
Okay. Well, if no other future agenda items, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting for today. And then as soon as we have any additional information on the next meeting dates, we'll get those out to everyone as soon as possible. Thank you to everyone. It's always so good to talk with you. Like Martha, I look forward to meeting in person as well. I think it's always nice to put a face with our fellow commissioners.
And Beth, thank you for your leadership on this. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Everybody have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
You too.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Dino, are you still on board?
I am. Do you want to?
Yeah, is there a number I could call you at?
There is. Ready?
Yeah.
410.
Wait. Dino, you're still on the main line. If you guys want to touch base by email, that might be better.
No, I just want to know a number I can call him at. Thanks.
But I think that'd probably be better exchanged by email because this is still the public line.
Sure. Okay, we'll do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
And this does conclude today's conference. All parties may disconnect.